Well, hello. I've been waiting a year to make this video. It's going to be an honest comparison of my Etsy shop and my Shopify website after having the latter for a year. Now, I have done one video comparing the two after having my website for a few months, but now that I've got a year under my belt, I feel like I'm better able to show up and tell you what I found, because I found some interesting things out, you guys. Just bear in mind that this video is going to be from the point of view of a handmade seller. So, as I usually say, take what serves you and leave the rest. Oh, but intro. Okay, hi, I'm Kim. This is the Coffee and Craft podcast where I drink coffee, except it's tea today, and I haven't got any craft. But yes, I have got my my Coffee and Craft podcast mug. It is the year from now. You'll be glad you started one, because that seems perfect for today's video. Right, okay, let's crack on. We'll start with visits first. I've got my trusty notes in front of me because I can't be trusted to remember anything. My Etsy visits for the year have been 6,747, and my Shopify visits for the same year, have been 4,714. The sales have been interesting. Now, I'm not going to give you my exact figures, but I will say that Etsy just made it by 2 orders. That was it. So it was literally almost 50-50 split between my sales on Etsy and my sales on Shopify. I do think the way that things are going on Etsy and Shopify so far in 2024, if things carry on as they are, I do think Shopify is going to beat Etsy in terms of sales over the course of the next year. But that's a video for the future. Let's stick with the year just gone. So sales-wise, it's been 50-50 between the two. But what we're really interested in is revenue, and revenue is Shopify. It's, again, without giving you exact numbers, Shopify, I've made more money on there than I have on Etsy. For the simple reason, I found very, very early on that my bigger ticket items, which are sort of hand painted and hand embroidered project bags, hand embroidery, hand finished items, handmade, etc., etc., they don't do so well on Etsy, where the buyers tend to be looking for smaller ticket and cheaper items. So even if I sell more on Etsy, I tend to not make as much, whereas I can sell less on Shopify but make more. Not to mention Etsy's fees, which mean that I end up having to put the price up on Etsy to cover the fees, which is why things are cheaper on my website. I can pass the saving on to my customers. Etsy have won out in terms of visits. Etsy and Shopify have been pretty much the same in terms of sales, but in terms of revenue and profit, it's been Shopify. Now, when it came to Etsy's visits, because I don't send my traffic there anymore, I send it to my website, I wanted to know more about exactly where that traffic was coming from, which was a big ask because this is Etsy and their analytics, they're not great. But they said that over the course of the past year, I have sent 14% of the traffic. But when I drilled down, there was no information given as to where that was coming from, whether that be Instagram, YouTube, etc., etc. So I was like, okay, I'll just have to take their word for it. So then I had a look at the remaining 86% of traffic that Etsy had sent, and almost all of it came from the free Google ads that they run. Now, I don't pay for ads. I haven't opted into Etsy offsite ads. So this is literally just the free Google ads that Etsy run, and the majority of my traffic comes from there. The next are the random pages. I call them random pages, but you know, it says like Etsy app and other pages. I got a chunk from there, but it doesn't tell you exactly which pages they're talking about, so clear as mud. And Etsy search is next, and that brought in the least amount of traffic of them all, which will be surprising to absolutely no one. And what's interesting is the fact that the majority of my traffic came from the free Google ads, and I make use of those on my website as well. And Shopify's analytics are a lot better than Etsy's, and so I can see that not only have I got traffic this way, but I've also made sales from the free Google ads. So overall, that's been my biggest takeaway. I get fewer visits on my website than I do on Etsy, but I don't need as much. My website converts a lot higher and I make more revenue and profit from my website. And I don't have to spend an awful lot of time promoting it. Whereas with Etsy, the year before I started my website, it was like my foot was flat on the gas the entire time, and I kept feeling the tendrils of burnout creeping in, and I didn't feel like I was getting enough in return for all of that work. Okay, so I'm guessing if you clicked on this video, then you might be curious to know whether or not a website would be good for you or not. Well, I can't tell you that, but here's what I've found to be the downsides and the upsides of having a website. And the downsides list is this big and the upsides list is ridiculous. So we'll go through it really quickly. But in short, the downsides, well, the biggest one has got to be the cost. That's probably the biggest block that most people have. As I've mentioned, I use Shopify. When I signed up to it, it was £20 a month. Then it went up to £25 a month, which I'm not going to lie, I was a bit like, ooh. But I was still making enough each month to more than pay for that. So it was okay. But I have now switched to paying the subscription annually, because then it's cheaper and it's now back to the equivalent of paying £20 a month. What I would suggest, if you don't know whether or not you're ready for a website financially and you're selling on Etsy, check how much you're paying each month in fees. And if it's creeping up, or it's the same as, or even worse, if it's more than the cost of running a website each month, then financially you're ready. And that's where I was at, and I was there for a little while, to be honest, before I made the leap, because the main reason for me dragging my heels to start a website, and this is the second downside to it, was the time involved in learning how to, because it is a steep learning curve. Or for me at least, I had to learn how to navigate around a whole new platform and how it worked and where they kept things. In some ways it was like learning a new language as well. For example, on Etsy you've got categories, and on Shopify you've got collections. They do pretty much the same thing, but they're called different things and they're kept in different places. You've also got to find out what the limitations are of certain templates that you might use. Now there's certain things that I can and can't do with the template that I've got, so you have to kind of learn as you go. No one can tell you what's right for you. That's also the frustrating thing. You kind of have to jump in and start swimming yourself, which is hard. And for me that was harder than the financial leap. I'm very tired, guys, so I'm struggling to sort of string sentences together. How am I doing? Not well. Oh, good tea. Right, and this last one, I wasn't really going to include it at all, but you do hear this said a lot, so I thought I would at least bring it up. A lot of people say, what is the point of having a website because you have to drive your own traffic? Well, again, this wasn't an issue for me because I was already doing that on Etsy. And if you're finding that you're having to drive your own traffic and your own sales and do all of that work to get results back, then you may as well be doing it on a website if you financially are able to. Okay, now we're going to come to the positive things that I have learned about having a website over the course of a year. And yes, I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot because my brain is just turning to mush. Okay, you don't need to be a Google SEO whiz. Obviously, that helps. But I would not describe myself as an SEO whiz. I've said before, I don't like SEO. I don't like looking for keywords. It's boring. It's necessary, but it's boring. Now, the reason why I say you don't have to be an SEO whiz, it's not that you don't have to try with regards to SEO. It's just that, as I've touched on earlier, I get traffic from Google and I've gotten sales from Google, and I am not an SEO whiz. So your best is going to be good enough, is what I'm trying to say. I think sometimes when people listen to others who are very good at SEO, they can come away feeling like it's very complicated and it's something that other people can do but they can't. And I I'm very wary of anything that makes you feel like you are not empowered to be able to do things like this yourself. Yes, you can. Same with ads. I don't, as I've mentioned, I don't run ads, and I still get consistent sales, even with the free Google ads, which I really don't understand very well at all. So can you imagine what I would be able to achieve if I did? I know, if I just could think in a straight line for any length of time, oh, I would rule the world. But I wouldn't want to, because who could be bothered? Another bright thing is that your traffic will convert better, because people who land on your website will be there for you and your items, whereas people who land on your item on Etsy may be browsing, and let's be honest, they are pulled in 100 different directions on Etsy, because as far as Etsy's concerned, a sale is a sale. They don't care where it comes from. So the buyers are literally like shown 100 different shiny things, and the shiniest thing usually wins. There are no other shiny things to compete with on your website. The other thing that I really, really like is it always makes me think of a snail. You can take your Shopify site around the internet with you wherever you go, or most places. It integrates with so many other different platforms. So you can integrate it with Facebook and Instagram and sell on social media if you wanted to. I don't know if it links up with Pinterest, but I would be surprised if it didn't. YouTube, mailing lists. Oh, you're not limited to sending traffic there and there alone. You can also bring it with you and bring it to your audience, which I just think is a game changer. I've spoken about this in the past. Another good reason about it is that it protects you from being buffeted about so much by all of Etsy's changes. And we all know that Etsy likes to change things a lot. So things like star seller badge and localization. It's not a thing. It's not a thing on your website. That alone is a huge pro. I made if you haven't seen it, I made a video recently where I was having a bit of a whinge about Etsy's localization and how I had been dinged by it for the last few months. Well, I went back and had a look. Turns out it's been a lot longer than a few months. But I didn't notice, because I've been putting all of my efforts and energies into my website, onto my website. You get my point. So I didn't notice that I've been only selling to the UK on Etsy for quite some time. Yes, Etsy, I've noticed. You buggers. But this is my point. Because I have my website, I mean, it's a pain in the neck, but hey, if Etsy isn't going to give me access to international customers, my website will. That was to Etsy, not you guys. I mentioned earlier that you can make more revenue because you don't have to factor in all of the extra fees. But again, this does tend to depend on how much you're already making. Etsy does have the edge if you're just getting started, or if you're, because you only pay fees when you sell something on Etsy. When you're just getting started and you're not making too many sales, I do think that has the edge over a website. But it all comes down to you, and only you know your numbers. So if it's not right for you now, that's perfectly fine. It's definitely something that you should be working towards. But yes, once you do reach that point, it can be cheaper to sell on a website than it is on Etsy. Because those fees, and if they put them up again, but I won't mind so much because I will have my website. Oh, and the last one I did want to mention, it doesn't protect you completely from being copied, but you are less likely to be copied. Now, this is probably where I'm going to get a bunch of people in the comments going, actually, I've got a website and I was copied. Okay, like I just said, it doesn't stop people from copying you, but it does make it harder, because when you're showing your work on things like social media and Etsy, there are a lot of people all looking at your work, and not all of them are going to be customers. A lot of them are going to also be people who are looking at their competition to see what works so they can model it. I'm not going to rant about that. You know where I stand with that. But there's a lot of advice out there to be good at what you do by going out to your competition and just copying, modelling, being inspired by what works for them. And I'm not talking about keywords and SEO. That's not copying. Nobody owns keywords. But, well, unless it's trademarked, in which case you shouldn't be using it as a keyword. Let's move on. I'm talking about designs, people's artwork, you know, like something like this, you know what I mean? You know what I mean. Don't you start splitting hairs in the comments because I'm in no mood. Okay, so all of that said, is my website going to replace Etsy? Nope. If I had to choose one, I would choose my website in a heartbeat, but Etsy still does have its place. I wouldn't want to sell on Etsy alone because it's unhinged, and I would probably burn out so fast. I mean, selling on Etsy has changed so much for handmade sellers over the last few years, and what you have to do to keep those sales coming in has changed. And also not just to keep the sales coming in, but also to protect your work as well. It's becoming a weekly thing now to see stories of artists and designers speaking about how their work has been ripped off and has been copied and is on various other websites. It's depressing to say the least, but it does at least still bring in some sales, even if they are just domestic, and even if it isn't as much as my website. I'm going to keep it while it pays for itself, and it is just paying for itself. But again, it's my website that is my golden child, and it is my website that I will be focusing even more of my energy on in the year going forward. I've seen enough over the past year to really see the value in having a website. And if you are on the fence, if you have the budget for one, but you're just not sure because of the time and the effort and the work involved, that's what I would say to you. Seriously, if you're running a handmade business and you want to keep smiling, you need to unhook yourself from the Etsy hook. And if you've got this far, you will know that last week I asked you to let me know what video YouTube selected for you, and they just selected the same video for everybody. So I'm choosing the video this week, and it's going to be how to get out of the Etsy rut, because I think it's a good one to follow on from this video, unless you've already seen it, in which case I'll see you next week. Ta-ra.